utterly helpless. This is how many citizens of Wisconsin feel when experiencing significant mental health issues. However, there is a specific process in place to assist Wisconsin citizens in the most need of mental health services. I have been working with Wisconsin Chapter 51 Law as an institution registrar for Winnebago Mental Health Institute for the past 5 years. If at some point you or a loved one are detained on an involuntary hold due to mental illness, these are the legal steps that you will likely be facing. I'm going to explain to you each legal step in the involuntary civil commitment process in its most basic form. I want to start with you at the very beginning, the point of detainment. So the most common technique to initiate an involuntary hold is to detain under Wisconsin Chapter 51 Sub 15, known as an emergency detention. I have actually handed you an example of this legal paperwork. You want to look at Exhibit A. This is the actual legal emergency detention paperwork that would be served. What are the criteria for being detained under an involuntary hold or emergency detention? First, a person must be deemed mentally ill. They must also be a danger to themselves or others. Examples of this behavior would be aggressive to other people, evidence of self-abuse, evidence of suicide or suicidal statements or ideations. Typically, local law enforcement will be the ones doing the detainment. They will then transport that patient to a local mental health facility or a facility such as Winnebago Mental Health Institute. Also, the county for which that person resides, their county department of health services must also authorize their admission. So a person can be detained for up to 72 hours under an emergency detention if they are deemed mentally ill and a danger to themselves or others. So what happens after these 72 hours? After those 72 hours, a person is entitled to have a probable cause hearing within those 72 hours of being detained, or the case must be dismissed. I have actually given you an example of a dismissal order. If you please look at Exhibit B, that is the actual dismissal order used by the court systems. So at the probable cause hearing, if they have a probable cause hearing, there are actually different state statutes for which a person can be held inpatient after 72 hours. The first one we're going to look at here is called an order for final hearing. The legal outline for this is actually Wisconsin Chapter 51, Sub 20, Sub 8, Sub B. I've actually handed you an example of this paperwork. If you want to look at Exhibit C, this is the actual physical legal paperwork used by the court. If probable cause is found by the judge, a person can be detained for up to 14 more days until they have a final hearing. Or they can enter into what's called a settlement agreement, outlined by Wisconsin Chapter 51, Sub 20, Sub 8, Sub BG. These are a great option for patients because they are an agreement instead of an order. Basically, the patient is agreeing that there is probable cause and that they do have a mental illness, and it outlines certain terms and conditions that must be followed in order for the settlement agreement to be executed. I have actually handed you an example of this. This will be Exhibit D of the paperwork that I handed out to you. A settlement agreement, you can be held for up to 30, 60, or 90 days. And actually, that's only the time that the county will follow you through it. It does not necessarily mean you'll be held inpatient during that time, that whole entire time. If you follow all the terms of that agreement, the final hearing will be deferred. Also, if you're at this probable cause hearing and probable cause is not found, it can be dismissed, which would refer back to Exhibit B of the legal paperwork. So at the probable cause hearing, probable cause can be found and a person ordered inpatient until their final hearing, or the person can agree to probable cause and enter into a settlement agreement at which the final hearing is withheld, as long as that person follows the terms of that agreement. If probable cause is not found, the matter is dismissed. So then what happens at a final hearing? A person is entitled to have a final hearing within 14 days of being detained and after probable cause has been found. This is outlined under Wisconsin Chapter 51, Sub 20, Sub 7, Sub C. So a person can be committed long-term or agree to long-term care if certain conditions and criteria are met. Let's look at the first one. This will be a civil commitment. This will be Exhibit D in the paperwork that I handed out to you. A person can be civilly committed for 3, 6, 9, or 12 months. In order for this to occur, a patient must be examined by a psychiatrist at the facility they are detained, and also 2 independent outside evaluators. The psychiatrist and the 2 outside independent evaluators will then submit their reports to the court system, at which the judge will use to make a determination if a person should be civilly committed or not. Another option would be, if the person hasn't already, they can actually enter into a settlement agreement at this time. The advantages of entering into a settlement agreement at this time, again, the maximum amount of time to be held under a settlement agreement is only 90 days, which is much shorter than the max of 1 year under a civil commitment. Again, if you are committed or you agree to a settlement agreement, that does not necessarily mean you will be held inpatient that entire time. It just means that is the amount of time that your county will track your mental health services. Again, that will occur after the order for final hearing. So at the final hearing, a person can be civilly committed by a judge for up to 1 year at an inpatient psychiatric facility based on those independent doctor evaluations and the psychiatrist evaluations. So let's recapture all of the main elements of the Wisconsin's involuntary civil commitment process. There are 3 significant steps in the involuntary civil commitment process in the state of Wisconsin. First, you have your emergency detention. Then you have your probable cause hearing, again, which probable cause can be found, or you enter into a settlement agreement, or that order is dismissed. And then the final step, if it goes that far, is a final hearing at which you can be civilly committed for up to, but not over 1 year, at that point you can also agree to a civil or a settlement agreement if you had not already done so, or again, that matter can be dismissed at that final hearing. It is very important to have a basic understanding of Wisconsin's involuntary civil commitment process. At some point in your lifetime, you or someone close to you may have to go through this process. Will you be ready?